Yo, what's good, gamers? What's good? My name is Dr. Ryan Terrell, PsychSensei, and happy Friday, and welcome back to Coffee with Casey. Bro, Casey, yo, what's up? How are you, bro? Cheers.
I'm doing good. Cheers to you, my man. How are you? You doing all right this week?
I'm doing good. Had a good 420. This is a good 421. Got to touch some grass yesterday. It was great. Got to walk my dog. Got back in that Pokemon Go.
Hey, okay.
Yeah, there's a school. It's really nice because I like to walk to the school that's next to me and beat at the gym and like this is mine now. And think of all the kids that I may cry because this is a real adult game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm sad because where I live now, I'm not I'm not near like a gym or a Pokestop or anything. So I literally can't play. I have to drive like a half hour if I want to get to something. But there is like some exotic like special areas where I'm at because it's at the trailhead of like a couple different hiking spots. So there's like little perks, but it's not. I can't replenish my goods, man. I need
Dude, that's the problem. Like before when I used to play, I was like in USC and like in my office there's like I was triangulated by like three stops and like everyone used to use incense. It was like a party. Now it's like barren here. Like I literally have to farm and it's so sad. Now it's for actual fitness and not for like for fun. It's so sad.
It was actually so crazy because at the top of Pokemon Go's prime,
good times. Oh, that was a time.
Yeah, I was looking for places, and places would charge more if they were right next to a Pokestop because it was so popular. Like to rent out, like you could bill an extra couple $100 per month if you were next to a Pokestop. It was wild.
Bro, that is wild. The Poke tax, literally. The
Poke tax. Yeah, it was nuts. Other fun fact about Pokemon Go. I didn't find out until just like in the last year, but my brother-in-law is like the head honcho for the OC's like Reddit community for Pokemon Go.
What?
Like that. So yeah, it was funny. I was hanging out with my sister and we had a brunch last weekend, and he's like, "Oh, I have to go," and I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Oh, there's like a bunch of people waiting for me. I gotta go like kick this bad boy off." And I had no idea what he was talking about. And my sister was like, "Oh yeah, it's probably this Pokemon Go thing, you know." And
that's so awesome.
He left and then he came back. It was funny.
Yeah, there was a Lapras, the shiny Lapras over there. We had to like raid that shit. Yeah, we had like 400 people. No big deal, but we got it. You got one? You want one? You like has like 3.
Yeah. So I'm well connected, you could say.
Honestly, the thing that I loved about Pokemon Go and still do, one, like I think it was the first time that I've ever seen groups of people outside together, and you just watch them, like you just people watching and see like waves of people move from one side of the park to the other side of the park and just like in droves, right?
Yeah.
And then the wholesome community that it built of people. Like you never heard of anyone like getting abducted via Pokemon Go. They might have fell off a cliff or two, got hit by a car, but nothing bad happened to them from the community, or at least I haven't heard anything. So I think in 2016, I believe 2016, 2017, it was it was amazing. It was such a great time to be alive to watch the Pokemon Go.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't fly. And I mean, right now, I feel like some people are starting to come back out again because COVID restrictions have lessened a little bit. But yeah, it's nothing like it was in its prime. And that was a very joyous time. I love just like seeing people go out and doing that. And I would literally like take my then girlfriend, now wife, out, and like we would just drive around and we'd like slow down near places. Get out. Like that would be the date. Would be like, oh, we're just gonna go out and walk and do Pokemon Go stuff. And it was just like it's super fun. I miss it.
Ooh, that was smart, Casey. That was smart. Yeah. So back in the day when Casey was still a starving undergrad, he had an efficient way to go on a date. Yeah, babe, you wanna like get some Pokemon?
Want to get some Pokeballs?
Bro, that's Bro, that's next level. That's smart. That was smart.
Hey man, it seemed to work out.
Although what was really cute is like shout out to Casper Du. Like Casper will play Pokemon. He's the coach of OG. Like he'll play Pokemon Go, and the cutest thing is like listening to him talk about him playing with his kid. Like, now this is an intergenerational thing, right? Like he's like in his 30s, his kid's like in his under 10s, and they go play Pokemon together. And he's like showing him out, like, yeah, bro, I actually got some sick Pokemon. Like, show me his Pokemon.
That's awesome. I'm jealous of that. I love that kind of. I see those videos now of I guess I'm an old man, and it's like people my age who have kids, and then they're playing video games. I'm like, man, I want that. I want like a little video game buddy.
Oh my god! And then when you buy a system, they're like, this is actually for me, but you get to play it. This is for us. Yes, thank you. This is my excuse that I get to buy this new thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's fun to reminisce about those times. I miss them.
Good times. So, Casey, I know that we had like 2 to 3 episodes already about nutrition and things that you put in your body. Oh my god, sorry. That's a pet peeve. I have a side project, right? So I talked about it a little bit. But I've been editing like all the videos that I do, and so like I've been trying to tell people like, oh, if you really want to get better at things, you have to note your metrics, right? You have to actually track your metrics and see what you're doing. Yeah. And so, bro, this is my tracking list of how many times I've said, likes and ums. Ooh. In like an hour and a half span. And it's so like every time I heard it, I was like, oh, and fucking edit it. Yeah. And it's so cringe. And so now I'm trying to be more conscious of these filler words that I use. And so like I'll catch them and have like a little mini aneurysm. I'm just what I'm trying to do.
No, I totally relate to that because I've done that before for myself. I have to talk a lot slower and pace myself when I want to make sure that the words come out are very well thought out and all that. And when I get really excited, I slip back into talking a little bit faster, and then I start throwing in all the buzzwords and all the uhs and ums and all this kind of thing. And there it is, right? So then I feel bad about it. I was in a MUN class when I was in high school, and we did that where they would just like throw stuff at you every time you said a buzzword, and you had to weed it out of people. Model United Nations. It's basically like a debate class. And
damn.
I hated it because one of my huge fears when I was a kid was just any kind of presentation that I had to get. Yeah, public speaking was literally like the worst fear that I had.
Look at you
I get like clammy hands, and I'd be like so nervous. I'd be like butterflies in my stomach, those kind of things. And it was really, really, really bad. And it wasn't until probably end of high school, maybe early college in my undergrad years, where I was just like, I need to start forcing myself to do stuff that I'm bad at and that I hate. And so I intentionally started forcing. I was like, all right, I'm going to become a TA. I'm going to start being over these other kids and explaining things to them. And I still to this day get really, really nervous and anxious and jittery anytime I have to do like a little team talk or anything like that. And I force myself to continue to teach just because of that. And I hate it, but at the same time, I feel like it's made me grow as a person. So I've done those tallies. I hate them, and it makes me feel bad because then I just look like an idiot to myself, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm the worst ever.
I'm gonna like highlight what you said, where I love that you said like force myself to do it. It's something I was really uncomfortable doing, but even when I still go to do these team talks, I get nervous. I think that's really something to highlight, to say that even though someone's doing something doesn't mean they're not nervous. So if you think like, if you're a pro, if you're like, oh my god, this guy simple, or oh my god, closer, like they just go out there so confidently, they don't ever feel nerves, like they just go out and do the thing. It's like, bro, you don't know actually how nervous they feel too. They just do it anyway, or they use that anxiety, that fear that they have for something more positive, and then they crush it. Like they feel it too.
Yeah. When I was working at UCLA, a phrase that all the strength coaches had for the athletes there, which was, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
That was everything. And anytime anyone said, I don't want to do something, then the entire team had to do it. And it was just like, okay, so the second someone shows any hesitation about it, it's like, we have to do this thing now, just because you have to be able to manage your uncomfortableness, is what they were trying to get into us. And I've tried to take that with me, but I still get the jitters, and I feel like sometimes people can see it, but out here trying.
Absolutely. I think that's what it is. It's about trying it, or at least noticing this is what makes me nervous, or I don't know if I want to do this thing. That should be your signal, like you should probably try to do this thing at least once. It kind of reminds me of like my Gung, rest in peace. Like that was his thing with trying new foods, because you know Chinese people. Like there's a lot of interesting things that we eat. But sometimes he'd be like, this is this thing. Like, what is that? He's like, just put it in your mouth and chew it around. And if you don't like it, you can spit it out, but at least you tried it. And so I really try to take that lesson of trying foods to trying things, or this is hard, I'm going to try it.
I love it. Yeah. I'm always down to try. Well, there's a couple things I'm not willing to try, but pretty much very close to anything that someone wants to do with me. It's an activity, or it's a food, or an experience of some kind. I'm usually down to try it at least once, because then I can say definitively, I've done it and I don't like that thing. And
or I can tell you why I don't like this thing.
Exactly. It gives you, you have a little bit more clout to say, okay, well, this is why I don't like it, because I've actually done it and I experienced it and it's not for me. But yeah, there's a couple that like I probably
like meth.
There's some things that might have some lasting consequences on the lifespan that I'm not willing to dabble in, and I'm too nervous about. But I probably don't have to go to Detroit to know that I'm not going to like it very much, kind of thing.
True. Maybe you would like it, but the whole after fallout part, maybe that's the part you wouldn't like. At least that's what most people don't like. So what I hear on Drugs Inc.
Yes.
So like we should care about drugs. Why do you think we should care about what we put in our bodies? Because we hear about it all the time. Most millennials grew up with a food pyramid or see the ads for how to get healthy or eat this, do this diet or whatever. Yeah. But in actuality, why should we actually care, Casey? Tell me.
I feel like this is just such a big topic that gets really underappreciated. And it's a lot of times when you look at nutrition textbooks or nutrition courses, or when you're talking to a nutrition professional, they just immediately jump in with, here's the prescription, here you go, eat this many calories, eat these specific foods, cut out those foods, whatever. And they just tell you to do it. And you might come in and say, oh, I have a goal of weight loss or some such. And they're like, okay, do this, here you go, boom. I feel like, especially in athletics and in the performance realm, and even in the clinical realm, taking it a step further, in the classes, and really just outlining what are some possible benefits to nutrition. Like why should people care about it? So that way you have that intrinsic motivation to actually want to change. And this is something that never ever came up once in one of my single textbooks or in one of my courses or anything like that. When I was doing this, I had to kind of piece all this together myself. And I realized
wait. They don't teach you why you should care in nutrition classes. They're just like, here's all the information, or like, here's the calories you should intake.
It's purely science driven. Like they don't actually tell you. They'll say, if you like, this is what happens if you do this, or they explain a process. But they don't sit down and just have like a little introduction chapter where they're like, oh, the powers of nutrition or something like that, and really trying to get you jazzed about it. Like I've never had that experience before in any of my classes, and I found that all of my clients have a very similar experience, where it's unless you personally experience it or have some clear link to it where nutrition has helped you personally overcome some issue, usually people don't have buy-in to it because it's just something that's part of the day-to-day, and they don't really see the link between that and any specific outcome that they might be going for. It takes usually some very clear lines of connection for people to start putting it together. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is, like, I was struggling with getting buy-in with a lot of athletes when I was starting out, and I realized that this was the missing element, was people just don't care. Like, straight up, like that's really all this. People just don't care. And if you tell them the reasons to care, they still probably don't care, or they're just too lazy, or they don't think that it is. There's a couple things here, which is, one, you're not going to change unless the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of the change effort. And by that, I mean, like, if you have something that's really crushing you right now, I'm progressively becoming overweight or some such, right? And if you don't do anything, you're just going to keep on that same trajectory, right? Like, the fastest way to keep getting what you've been getting is to keep doing what you've been doing. And until your current state is more painful than the act of change, you're not going to want to change. And you need that motivation to want to change something. And nutrition is so habitual for everybody that requires a lot of effort, because it's something you have to do every single day, right? If you're going to modify your nutrition, it's something you have to do every single day, day in, day out.
The first thing that comes to my head when you're talking about that is, like, all right, anytime those who have, like, went to a vegan diet, those who went gluten-free, those who before were vegetarian or had some type of food belief, and you're always like, oh, so, like, why'd you choose to go vegan? They have some type of, for the animals, for the earth. Yeah. I saw this documentary. There's some type of, like, deeper thing that connects them to what they eat. Or if you go to somebody who's not in the best place healthily, they say, well, if I don't eat these things, I'm gonna die. That's really interesting for me, where you started nutrition and there's not you need to connect the person to something they believe, thus they're gonna put that in their body on a more consistent basis. Like, because everyone that has a certain diet that they follow, there's a certain reason. Yeah. I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to get healthy. It makes my eczema go away. There's some type, Joe Rogan told me, and I'm a Joe Rogan disciple. Like, there's some type of thing that people connect to, thus they believe it. Thus we try to teach, like, this is the way and this is the beliefs you have around food.
Yeah.
Because it's so deep within our culture and the meaning making and the relationship we have with it. It's really interesting that it was just your science.
Yeah.
That politicians also influence. Like, what?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm not a fan of this approach, but I do think that it was valuable to learn, all the science behind me coming from a research background. I definitely link onto that, but there is so much of a cultural aspect to it. And in modern times, it actually is, it's really interesting because it's just hopping on the bandwagon, right? It's like a trend. You mentioned the Joe Rogan fanboy. Yeah, you see that all the time. Or a lot of times it's monkey see, monkey do. It's like, what's the big guy at the gym doing? Okay, I'm going to copy him. Or maybe it's very, very cultural. It's like, okay, this is the food that my family makes. This is the food that I enjoy personally. This is, it brings people together, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of like emotional, social, cultural elements to food and food intake patterns that doesn't really get talked about as much. And I think that, again, just having a good understanding of what nutrition can do for people is really important. And I'll talk about some brass tack stuff that I actually do with a lot of my athletes. But on the front end, I'll just say there's very few things in life. So despite people usually...
with that intro, I was actually drop a bomb. There's very few things in life.
Here comes
a bomb, yeah?
So there's very few things in life, despite what people usually believe about nutrition. Like the majority of people don't care about nutrition, but there's very few things in life that have the capacity to literally improve every other aspect of their life. And I like to sometimes make an analogy where it's like, if you're using a computer for work or for gaming or something, right? And you go from some busted old model with slow, crappy internet. And
it's like an Apple to a PC. Absolutely. Yes.
And then you go to, you upgrade your 15-year-old PC and you suddenly get crazy high internet speed. And all of a sudden, you're going to have immediate and significant performance improvements with whatever you're doing on that, right? And similarly, I would say you are the fundamental unit in your own existence. So if you improve your own body or your mind, then literally everything that you do from then on will be subsequently improved. And with nutrition, what we can say, which is funny because everybody's heard it, is you are what you eat. It is quite literally true. Except for when you were a sperm and an egg.
Then you're half of what you eat. Yeah.
Every single bit of you was created by some nutrients that you or your mom ingested, which is kind of, a lot of people don't like to think about it, right? And even now, if you look at your body, there's continual changeover, right? That's continually being replaced. And I think you said in a previous episode, your body replaces itself every like 7 to 10 years or something like that, which is absolutely true, which is really cool. It's like, okay, my body is brand new every decade. And how did it become brand new? It's not just, you're like mining minerals out there and then like attaching them to you or like throwing it inside you. Like it's literally 100% coming from everything that you have put into your body. And right. It's a little bit input equals output, just like when you're building anything out. So like the quality of the building blocks determine the quality of the built product at the end of the day. And so if you're trying to build a new you every decade, you want to make sure the quality of those building blocks are sufficient, right? Don't input trash and expect it to be amazing and top tier, right? And it's like a really easy concept, but I feel like so many people just immediately overlook that.
So, funny metaphor when you're talking. So, how you're like, every 10 years you become something what you were, what you put in your body, right? So... yeah. How you're like, you become like this beautiful butterfly and you're going to your chrysalis, you're going to metamorphosize into this beautiful thing. Well, it also depends, the butterfly of which you become also depends of what you make your chrysalis out of and what you eat. And so every 10 years, depending on what you built your butterfly body to be, that's not exactly going to be maybe as beautiful as you hoped, depending on what you spent your time eating. So your metamorphosis happens, although the niceness, quality, and beautifulness of your butterfly depends on what your butterfly eats.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful metaphor.
Depends.
Yeah, depends on what you're eating. But honestly, that's partly why I love nutrition science so much, is because you have like this Archimedes lever, right? You put like a tiny input, you put a little bit of effort into your nutrition, and then the output, it goes through the entire lifespan. So you have this pronounced ROI, and it's only because people are really short-sighted and they don't think in long terms. You don't see the immediate impact of that, but this literally rings across the entire lifespan. And so you have this huge improvement in things like your health span, just how well you feel healthy across your life, your lifespan, you can live longer, your body composition. Everybody usually, we got summer around the corner, right? So everybody's trying to get them beach balls right now, as well as performance, right? In your work life and your social life. And if you're competitive type A gamer, which I can't be because I suck too much. All this stuff, right?
Stop with that negative self-talk. We suck too much.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could be better, but I need to practice more, and that requires more time, and then time I don't have, which is unfortunate. But I mean, so you can even do some fun tests yourself, right? Where it's like, okay, Google whatever your biggest fear is, right? And say like, insert your fear and nutrition. And I guarantee you that you're probably going to find a link there, like regardless of whatever you input, like public speaking and nutrition. Okay, like top 10 foods to eat like before you go out and do public speaking. So like whatever your fear is, I mean, obviously, you know, if you're like afraid of, I don't know, aliens or something, then probably not going to
There's food for that. What are you talking about? There's food for that.
For the most part, you know, get strong, and you know, that way you can fight off the aliens if they come, and the strength will require the nutrition. There you go. Boom.
Now I'm curious, like in your meetings with people, how much time do you spend of your sessions talking about this? Not the planning, not the here's the diet, here's the macros or the things you could, should eat or avoid. But I'm thinking like, how much time do you actually spend doing the psych work of untangling the beliefs or things or hesitations or resistance that people have with diet and nutrition?
I would say that it is highly dependent on what they're utilizing my services for. So a lot of times the scope of work outlines, okay, we do one initial eval, and then we give some prescriptive element, and then we follow up to see if they're on track to hit their goals. This is good for data tracking, but I find that it's bad for long-term sustainable change. And in my private practice clients who I set up like a coaching agreement with for multiple months, it's something that I work on quite heavily, because what I've seen is that if knowledge was all you needed, then we'd all be billionaires with six packs, right? It's like telling someone, oh yeah,
save more money and you'll have more of it. Spend less, make like, more, finance.
Buy low, sell high in the stock market, right? Super easy, but how do you actually implement it? And usually the implementation part is hugely psychological, especially with food. And so you have to incorporate a lot of those things. And if you're not addressing them, then people usually fall off the wagon really quickly. So I love talking about this stuff when I have the time and I'm able to, and it works within the structure of the program. Unfortunately, especially in like a clinical setting, so a lot of clinical dietitians, they're like, oh yeah, you have to see the dietitian before you're discharged. A lot of those people, you know, they come in for diabetes or something, and then they're like, oh yeah, here's a handout, here's some foods to eat, here's some foods to avoid, boom, boom, boom. We get you out of there 15 minutes, and then they throw the handout away.
Classics, yes.
Yeah, like that's really common in the clinical setting. And then in the fitness world, it's very prescriptive. They turn people into robots, right? It's very much like, here's an Excel sheet, we're going to do calorie tracking and weigh your food, and boom, boom, boom. That's what happens in the bodybuilding world. So a lot of times it just gets omitted. But I find that if people really do want sustainable changes, it's necessary. Like, it's strictly necessary to talk about a lot of this stuff.
It sounds like you try like, okay, here is your prescription or your plan for your food and your diet. We're going to give it to you and see how far you get. And if you mess up, okay, we'll take it from there. But if not, you did it. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of nuts. So we have the data that says it takes at least like 10 weeks to overlay a new nutrition habit onto something, at least to the point where it might be chosen a decent chunk of the time. And I like to talk about lapses and relapses sometime, and they're expected, and we should plan for them.
Absolutely, yes.
Like they're going to happen. Let's plan around it. And then what do we do when it does happen? Because a lot of times people are just like, oh, you screwed up, you're off the wagon. Okay, so done deal. And it's really funny in the nutrition world too, because I'm going on slightly.
Oh, this is great. This is fine. I'm dragging you this way. I'm dragging because I'm interested in the habits and the
So
meaning making, and we're going to get back to, of course, why it all matters. I'll tie it back. Don't worry, we'll get there.
I heard an analogy, and then there's also a funny story that, not a funny story, but a practical application that I really enjoy. The funny analogy that I heard once was, if you have a pop tire on the road when you're driving, you pull over. And what do? You go and you change the tire and you fix that tire, right? You don't go out and slash your other 3 tires because one is ruined. That'd be absolutely ridiculous. Say, okay, well, what are we going to do? And it's fine. But when people have one bad meal, a lot of times people are like, well, to hell with this program. I'm gonna, all 3 of my other meals, this entire weekend's a wash. Might as well just go out binge drinking with the boys, right? It's just funny. It's just like, okay, you had one bad instance and then you immediately decide to throw everything else out too. And the body's incredibly resilient. So like, even if I'm working with like a bodybuilder in contest prep, they can still eat out like once a week. It's fine. So I mean, Joe Schmoes like us, like we can tolerate a lot more. One meal is not going to make or break you. That counts for nothing. Really. It's the habits over time that really do change you, not just this like one-off. And people go crazy with it, where they think that one failure means total failure. And I don't even like to call it a failure to begin with. And that's a key element to discuss on the front end, if you can, is let's plan for this. Like, this is going to happen. What are your high risk situations? What do we do if this does happen to capture us on the back end? And a lot of times, especially in esports, what I'll see is people will know their problems, and then they'll say,
yeah,
like they'll be like, I know exactly what my problem is. And then I'm like, okay, what can we do about it for next time? And then they don't want to plan around the next time, and then they just kind of let the thing happen. But they're like, no, I'll be better next time. We don't need to talk about this. And then next time happens, and then like, yeah, man, same thing happened again. I'm sorry, but this time I'll be better. And it's like, do you want to talk about how we can plan around it to make sure that like there's systems in place to capture us, or, you know, what can we do? And they're like, no, trust me, like I got this. It's just a matter of willpower. And I hate when people in the nutrition world tell me that it's a matter of willpower, because if you go heads up against your willpower, you will lose eventually. Like, you can
work for Frog and the Toad. What are you talking about? Work for Frog and the Toad.
You can't. And a good practical example of this in the nutrition world is like, if you put your favorite snack on your desk, you're going to eat it. Like, you could say no 1 million times, like once per second. Every time you look at it, you're like, nope, no. And by the end of the day, when you get this like cognitive fatigue and you're tired, it only takes one yes to undo the 10 million no's that you gave it already. Like, you will lose. It's just a losing proposition. It's just a matter of time. You really do need to have something in place to capture yourself. And I find that, yes, willpower is an important element, but you can't bank on that. There has to be something else that you do as well too. It could be different kinds of motivation, which maybe ties into willpower, but also just a general understanding of the reality. Like, one bad situation is not going to make or break you as an individual. This is the impacts of nutrition on the body. This is what it can do. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's just like a drop in the ocean. Like, it really doesn't mean a whole lot.
I know this is not what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But when I'm listening to you talk about basically the slashing one tire, all the tires with one tire, throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever metaphor you want to use, it's really interesting, because what you're talking about basically is a relationship. Your relationship with your diet, the relationship with food, the things you put in your mouth, with your body, with your values. And what I want to highlight, what you're saying, is typically people mess up once, they throw out everything. They say that's it, one bad meal, all the other meals, fuck it, whatever. That's so interesting, because I'm just thinking about between people. I'm thinking about between partners, between teammates, between coaches, where if we have one slip up or whatever, it's fine. People are resilient, relationships are resilient. However, if it's a slip up and you're saying, I know exactly how this is happening, I know how I'm going to react, or what have you, it's not that one slip up that messes a relationship up, but it's the continuous patterns, or the not caring, or the things that we do continuously that messes up relationships. The same thing can happen on the other side. It's the small little things that maintain relationships. It's not just that I forgot once and it's kind of cool, but if that becomes a pattern, that's bad. But if you mess up once and the next day you recover, or you're chill, you come talk to me after, we're fine. So it's really interesting how these patterns and these relationships and meaning making that we do with our food, not just only apply in that one area, but can also reflect in others. And I think why nutrition to me now is interesting, or not interesting, but really important this morning, is it can also inform the different relationships that you have, not with just food, but everywhere.
Yeah, I think so much of the issues in modern time with food and with diet is because of all the diets and the trends and the fads and the supplements and all this and that. There's definitely a creation of an entire generation of people who just have this really negative relationship with food. And I hate that. Like, if you ask some people different types of food and you ask them to evaluate them, a lot of times people will say, oh, this food is good or this food is bad, or so on. And they have these moral, yeah, they have these moral judgments on food. And really, food is not like inherently evil or good. It's just in relationship to what it does for you and your own personal goals that it might have an impact. And so some particular food item could could be counter to your particular goals, but in a different set of circumstances, it could actually be beneficial to your goals. So it's really interesting that people have these aversions. This has been shown to be linked quite intimately to eating disorders and all sorts of disordered eating patterns outside of like actual eating disorders. So just like disordered eating tendencies. And this tends to lead to people getting stuck in like a futile cycle where they like try really hard, they feel they fail, then they fall off and they go back on it. And so they just have this period of cycling with food. And this just predisposes you to all sorts of metabolic, physiological, and mental issues, which is not good. And I feel like that's more ever present now than it ever was in all of human history. I think it's a direct function of this poor relationship with food. I think that really that's the heart of it.
And just to tell you how serious that is, like eating disorders or disordered relationships with food, that's its own specialty. Like I couldn't treat someone like that. I would have to refer to someone that had specific training in eating disorders because of deep meaning making and the values and the relationship with something that you need to live and you're supposed to do every single day, eat. So I just want to say that and emphasize the point of that's such a serious condition that you need a specialist to really work with that population. And God bless them. That's rough. I remember we had a rotation and they said like they would screen people in our school like, are you sure you want to do this? And this is the things that you would do, because it was like trauma was like lower than this like screening process for people to go to. And so I was like, nope, I'm gonna go to college, thank you, bye. I mean that's how important and meaningful the relationship with food is from a psychological perspective.
Yeah, it's crazy. I do want to distinguish between just eating disorders, which are clinical diagnosable, like very serious issues, and disordered eating tendencies, which like a lot of people actually have. And I probably have several disordered eating tendencies that maybe I don't know about, or maybe I haven't been analytical enough with myself to find, but most people do have some little bit. It's very hard to find a 100% well-adjusted individual these days with their food.
Yes, I would say I'm a binge eater. I don't purge, I just binge. That's my problem. Yes.
Yeah, there's actually some criteria for that, which almost everybody seems to have. So they asked us in athletics when we were doing a talk with some of the like sports dietitians at different universities and stuff, and they were like, who here has ever exercised on the back end of eating a bad meal because they felt like, bad meal, right? Air quotes, judgment, whatever. But it's like, okay, so like yesterday you went out and you had a bad meal, you ate more than you should have. Who here has thought, oh, maybe the next day I'm going to hit up the gym just to try to work off some of that, calories. And then, like pretty much everybody raised their hand, and they're like, boom, you guys all have disordered eating tendencies right there. And so like, they're like, gotcha.
Gotcha. Yeah. Sweet.
And so it's just like, okay, this idea that you did something bad and you had a moral judgment on it, and then you decided to try to compensate for it somewhere else. Yeah. Kind of in line with this, there's a company out there which does nutrition coaching, and they have a really good program. It's called Precision Nutrition. They also have like a certification program to teach their own coaches and stuff like that. I've actually checked out some of their manuals, and they're pretty solid. Like, it's very evidence-backed, and I've known a couple RDs who have gone through the program as well. And so it's pretty solid. But one of the things that they used to do, which I really liked and thought was really interesting, which kind of ties into this, was they used to force, or I don't know, part of the initial program, the onboarding, or not the onboarding, like the first like week or two during the programming that they would give to the client. All they made them do was take a fish oil tablet for the first couple of weeks, like no actual nutrition programming or anything.
So placebo, that helps. I like it already. This is good. Or hazing.
Yeah, it's kind of placebo.
One of the two.
Yeah, but it's good for you, right? Most people are not getting a fish oil. But
unless it's burpful, not burpless, then we start talking. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so really what this was just trying to do was just trying to get them to
a base level of nutrition.
Base level nutrition. But the thought process was 100% rooted in psychological principles. So it was, one, can this individual, is this person at a spot where they can successfully do something as simple as taking one pill a day? If they're not at a state or a readiness of change and able to do that, then they're not going to be able to adjust food if they can't even take a pill daily. So one, it's partly an assessment of readiness for change. And two, that the second thing, which
I like that,
is even more important, is it ties into what I actually do in my own private practice, which is what you see as success begets success. So if you're successful at one thing, if you have these small wins, then you're going to get more wins. And if you can take a small win here, then you can take a slightly bigger win a little bit later, and you can just keep the good times going. And so if you can successfully, if this is all your coach gives you, says, I need you to take fish oil once a day for the next 1 week. Can you do it? And then they do it, and then they feel good. That, you know, you get a little pat on the back. You're like, gold star, here you go. Nice job. You successfully did the thing that I wanted you to do. Like, congratulations. It's a big deal. And so then from there, you can build on that. You can add extra little micro goals on top of it. So one, it assesses, are they actually ready to change in a spot where they can actually do these things, or do they need to address like their social life, their stress life, their work life, whatever first. But two, it's like, okay, here's a small win for you. Let's get the ball rolling, and then let's start building up with this and get bigger wins. So I really love that. Like, I think yeah, that's amazing. Like, I love that model. Something that I like to do is I like to assess at the end of my consults. I say, okay, so these are the action items. How confident are you on a 1 to 10 scale that you can actually do these things this next week, or whenever it is that I plan on seeing them next? And if they say anything less than an 8, then I say our goal is too hard and we have to revise it in order to make it more easy, because I want you to succeed at this goal. I want this goal to feel too easy. If this goal feels like it's gonna, if you say, oh, you know, it's probably like a 6, like I'll probably do it, but maybe not. Or if it's a 7, you know, I feel okay about it. No, I want you to say like, oh yeah, I got that. And then when they say it out loud too, then it's almost like it kind of holds them to it, because then they feel like they're like, well, I said it was too easy, so
yeah, I got it.
Shit, I got to actually do this, right? And that really helps out too. Is just getting them to get realistic goals that they feel really confident about. And I want it to feel too easy, and I want to have that success getting more and more success. And then that starts to rebuild on the back end their relationship with food when they take up these micro wins. Because a lot of times people try to 180 their diet, and then they do it for a month or something. They fall off the wagon, and they just feel like, oh man, see, I'm a failure. I suck. I can't do this. Like, dieting is impossible, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, like if we did it smartly, we can re-get that confidence in food, and also re-get some of that positive relationship with food too, because we can build in some leniency, right? Like, it doesn't have to be 100% strict if you're doing these micro goals. So anyway, those are some practical things that I like to do there too. But
what's really, really interesting, well, there's a lot of things that you just said that I really liked, and that I actually do too. The first is the goal thing. This happened all the time in academia.
Yeah.
For example, would help students, right, try to balance their life and manage their schedule and chop up their projects or their homeworks or things so that it's more manageable for them to do, or they got to see the progress and be happy about it. The funny thing is, though, when they have like a paper, or they had to read a lot of pages, they'd say, okay, this week you just have to read 10 pages. Can you do it? And I'm like, 10 pages, bro, I can read 20. Yeah. You know what? For this week, we'll just see what you got. We got 20 pages. Go for it. They come back. Okay, how'd you do, man? Bro, this week I gotta read 40 because I didn't read nothing. What do you mean? What happened? And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. I can read 40 this week. It's really interesting, the study that showed that students who had a tendency to double their work had like a 95 to 90% failure rate of completing that set of homework versus if they halved it. So they said, okay, I can do 10 pages. All right, dude, for you, just do 5. We're just gonna do 5, and if you do more, that's gravy. But let's just do 5 first. And once they're able to do 5, they could do more afterwards and had a higher success rate. So like you're doing, if the goal is too big or too lofty or whatever, and they're just not confident, I think I can do like a 5. Okay, it's too big. Let's cut it in half. And then you can see more success. And then I like what you said, little successes make bigger successes, and then you get the ball rolling to get that buy-in.
Yeah, no, I love that study. Actually, I might steal that. Have it. In my coaching, one of the things that I have at the end of my initial eval is I say, okay, write out 3 action items that you want to do.
I like that.
So it's either 3 to 5. So normally on my end, just so you guys, so listeners or normally I only have 1 to 2 nutrition goals at a time, unless they're like all in on nutrition, like pro level athlete who's willing to do everything, then maybe you can go a little bit higher than that. But for most people, 1 to 2 nutrition goals at a time, because you don't want to overwhelm them. And so I have them write out 3 to 5 goals. And then I say in the next box, and they don't know that the next box is coming, I say pick 1 to 2 of these that you actually want to do.
Ooh.
And then the next layer to it, which again, they don't know is coming, is I say, I want you to lessen this goal. I want you to make it feel too easy. And so I'm like, okay, make it even easier. So this is your goal. And then I tell them in the next box, write that exact same goal, but make it easier for you. And then it's kind of in agreement with what you just said, which is have it. I don't actually tell them to have it. I just say, make it easier. And then I tell them to write that to me. And then I say, okay. And then I'll pick like 1 if the 2 look maybe like it's too much effort for them, or if they rate lower than that 8 on the 1 to 10 scale. That's usually what I do on my initials, is I'm trying to lessen it as much as possible because I really want them to succeed with these goals.
Ooh, I like that. I might steal that one from you, because at the end of my sessions, I was like, I used to call it homework. I'd give my clients homework. Yeah. Then I changed it to challenge, because I don't want them to see it as work, but I'm going to give you this challenge.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking I might end the session with, okay, what do you think your challenge is for this week? And then break it down. I like that. That way they get to pick their own adventure. And I just get to like, okay, that's cool. I like it. And to be tapping in the right way. But if they get to pick it and we can make it smaller, I like that. That's a good, fun technique.
Yeah. So I'll probably talk about this in a little bit. And I do want to kind of come back to the why nutrition matters. Yeah. Kind of in agreement with this with them, where they pick their goals. The other question that I like to ask, or I like them to think about, is define success for you, essentially. Like what can I ask you in a month? What can I ask you in a month that we will know, yes, you succeeded, or no, you didn't succeed? And so a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I'll feel better. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, define feeling better.
Define feel better.
How would you know you felt better?
Yeah, and so I basically want them to be able to very clearly articulate for them exactly what does success looks like, because sometimes it's different from what my intention is, because they might say, oh, I want to lose weight on the front end, and then I ask them, okay, so what is success? And then they're like, oh, I want to lose, 50 pounds by next week. And then it's like, okay, well, that's probably not going to happen, bro, unless we chop off a leg, but let's revise that. So anyway, I like to know what they think definitively will define success. And so I let them pick their own metrics a lot of the time. And then that's what we'll build into the trackers, is what they think, because at the end of the day, that's it's most important to them. So absolutely. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of clinical dietitians and practitioners in like sporting space or whatever, they have ideas about metrics that they think are the most important, but who gives a shit? It's only at the end of the day. Like if a client comes to you and they want something, like the goal is to help them. And a lot of times at the end of the conversation, after they've got all that stuff on their head, they're able to much more clearly articulate exactly what it is that would define success for them. Because normally on the front end, they say, oh, I just want to feel better. But then after you talk to them and you work through all these things, they're like, okay, well, here's what we can do. I want to like have only like half the amount of incidences of like feeling tired in a day or something like that, So yeah, it's that's another one that I like to throw on there.
I agree with you. I think I asked you that question a couple different ways. I mean, clinical psych's got the magic question, the magic wand question, right? If you're gonna wave a magical wand and everything was fixed and better, how would it be? What would that look like? Paint that picture to me. Or I kind of asked that similar question to you too, of how would you know at the end of working with me it was successful? How would you know? What would that look like? And then they kind of describe it like, oh, it'd be better. Okay, what would be better? How would it be better? And then describe it observably. How would I know that would be better? Not just how it feels, because that's great, but at the same time, how would you know? And so if they can paint that picture for you, if they can give you an end goal, then we can kind of work towards it. I think another interesting one too is I would be winning more. Okay, if winning is the end and that's the goal, or if like, for example, if winning was McDonald's, and you want to get to McDonald's, there's many ways we can get to McDonald's, and it's going to feel differently, the different ways you can go to McDonald's. How would you like to get there? And they look at you like, what do you mean? Because it doesn't matter how we get there. We can walk, we can drive, we can use the bus, we can catch a horse, whatever. We can get to McDonald's, the winning, but how do you want to get there? Because that's all that matters.
Yeah. I'm taking the horse, man.
Bro.
Just saying that, yeah.
I'm crawling. Honestly, I'm hitchhiking, whatever. But we're going to get there. Yeah. Screaming and crying.
I do want to come back just real quick, and because you kind of touched on something, and I think this is a good segue back into the original topic, but many of the people that I work with have never worked with a nutrition professional before.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just don't know what we can offer to people. Similar to why should people care about nutrition? A lot of times people just are like, I don't know what kind of services you offer outside of maybe
weight loss. That's it.
Yeah. Or like, I've heard that you maybe make meal plans. Is that what you do? Like,
for weight loss. That's
it. For weight loss. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. So a lot of times people just don't know. And part of it is they don't know the link between nutrition and whatever their goal is, as I was saying before. And so when I work with other medical practitioners or performance practitioners, there's a much more clear link. As like an example, so if I'm working with an esports athlete, you talk to them and they're like, oh yeah, Matt has me doing, a physical therapist has me doing some wrist stretches and mobility work and stuff. And to them in their head, there's a very clear link. It's like, I use my wrist to play this game. I need this wrist. It needs to function. I need full range of motion.
There's like a nice one-to-one.
It's a perfect one-to-one, right?
Yeah.
In psych, it's probably maybe one step removed, but a lot of times, a lot of the
players, it's a big step removed.
Yeah. But a lot of times, a lot of them will tell me that like they know that team communication is important, that tilt is a big deal. They can articulate those things and be like, oh yeah, emotional definitely has linked to performance. But something that I struggle with is like, if I tell them to eat a piece of broccoli, a lot of them are like, I have no idea if that broccoli yesterday made me better today. Like there's no clear direct one-to-one association between those two things. Outside of like, okay, maybe they have like a clinical issue, like if they're having bad reflux or something, then, you know, we can show that one-to-one to resolve that clinical issue. But on the performance side, there's really no one-to-one link with nutrition that these people have seen. And so there's education on the front end, which is kind of getting back to the question of, okay, what can nutrition do for you? And there's a couple things that I like to highlight, and we can go in any direction with this, but some of the fun ones that I like to go over, probably the number one ask in esports and in general population is body composition management. And usually for the purposes of attractability. Am I more physically attractive to myself or to prospective partners and so on? And it's pretty obvious. I think most people do understand that nutrition is linked to body composition, right? Like a lot of people know that you can use diet to lose weight or to build muscle, but they actually did a really fun study, which I think is super fascinating. What they did was they pulled a bunch of individuals and they gave them a bunch of photographs of individuals' faces. And they said, I want you to rank these faces based off of how physically attracted you are to these faces. And I want to really highlight here that this is face only, body not shown.
Face only. Yeah, so face first team. That's it.
so you're not seeing
all faces, no bodies. Gotcha.
Yeah, you're not seeing like shredded six packs or anything like that, right? Like you're just seeing face only.
And got you.
Consistently, the faces of people who adhered to good nutrition practices were always ranked higher than the people who had very poor diets. What we actually found out was that there's skin tone that is a function of a lot of the micronutrients that we're eating. So if you're just eating enough like fruits and vegetables and, you know, like fatty fish, your face is naturally going to take on a look that is much more physically attractive to prospective partners. So if you just want to look more attractive
without working out,
face only, you will be rated much more attractive just by taking your nutrition seriously. Kind of in agreement with that. A lot of people like money, right? And I'm not trying to hold a judgment here, but this is a fact in America, at least. People who are rated more attractive make on average 10 to 15% more money than their less attractive peers. So if you start taking your nutrition more seriously, you're going to be a little bit more physically attractive and you're probably going to be making a little bit more money.
Fun fact though, I believe that's actually the percent increase from regular to organic is about 20 to 30%, right? Like,
so you have to pay more.
Yeah,
that's actually a whole other topic that I could talk a lot about, which is organic,
like free range and organic, and all those certifications that like are kind of whack, but like it's free range. It's just a bigger cage for them to like run around in with their billion other friends.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that another day, because that's actually a really fun topic for me. I really enjoy that one.
Okay. Let me write that down.
Yeah, write that one down. I can talk about that. I can talk about like fresh versus frozen and like canned. And
that one blew my mind. The fresh versus frozen and the blender and stuff.
Oh yeah. So more physically attractive. You're making a little bit more money. And let's say you care about performance, right? Like your performance, you want to win more. We have data from elite athletes literally for the last thousands of years. Like you go back to ancient Greek and Romans, the original Olympics,
the
right?
OGs, yeah.
Yeah, they've been using special nutrition practices to enhance their training and performance for literally thousands of years. Like
so they've been cheating for thousands of years. Go on.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, they got PEDs back then too. Also goes in agreement I'm not talking about purely physical performance here. I'm also talking about cognitive performance. So like if you go back in time again, like thousands of years, ancient Greek like students, they would do special nutrition practices because they believed it helped them study better and retain information better. Like they would do things like wear garlands of rosemary on their heads. And it's not until recently, literally in the last like 20 years, that we actually did the research and we found out that rosemary actually helps with memory consolidation and things like that. So like there was something to that, which is kind of nuts. So it's like we've been doing these practices for thousands of years, and it's just for some reason people are not really seeing a link between nutrition and what they're doing in modern times because it's not so one-to-one. But again, we've been doing this for thousands of years. You can be more physically attractive, you can make more money, you can win more, you can be smarter, you can be stronger, you can be faster, all this kind of stuff.
Like, where do you think we lost that connect between our food? Because it seemed like the relationship between us and food and changed, and the perception about us and what we put in our bodies and nutrition has changed. And it seemed like somewhere we got more scientific-y about it versus more arty. I don't know. Like, how would you describe that?
When did it actually happen? I would say probably the early 1900s is when it happened. And this is when we had mass industrialization of the food up until like the 50s or 60s. If you go back, like if everybody who's listening, you probably have grandparents who have like a garden in their backyard, right? My grandfather was obsessive about his garden. Up until like the 50s and 60s, most American families were getting a majority of their food homegrown from their own garden supply, and then they would go out and purchase the remainder. But the majority of their food and produce and stuff came from their own garden supply. Everybody was independently responsible for that stuff. That was on the decline, and that's on a major decline to today. But yeah, if we go back in time, I'd say 1900s is when the industrialization happened. And so we started mass producing a lot of foods. The quality of the food started going down. Our perceptions of food started altering. So once we progressed past, like 50s and 60s or so, the food industry, takeout food, restaurant food, chain stores, all this kind of stuff started coming out. And then we started having weird health consequences. Like people were starting to live longer. We're seeing more diabetes. We're seeing more obesity. They've had to revise their definitions of different metabolic syndromes. Like before it was called adult onset diabetes. That was the term for it. In contrast to type 1 diabetes, which is something you get at birth normally. So we had type 1 diabetes, which was at birth diabetes. And then we had something called adult onset diabetes. We had to revise this because we started eating ridiculous and we started getting diabetes, and children were getting diabetes left and right as well too. So we had to say we can't call it adult onset diabetes. This is just type 2 diabetes now. Sorry. A lot of our thought process around food and around clinical conditions and things like this started to change. There's a major cultural shift away from just like farmers and making your own food, and even like I said, up until the 50s and 60s, where most families were independently responsible for growing and eating their own food, to takeout, grocery stores, chain restaurants, someone else doing all this stuff, all this processing. We started seeing some weird health consequences. Different diets started being created on the back end of health consequences to try to rectify these health consequences. So it was like, okay, what can we do to get people to lose weight? Boom. What can we do to get people to improve their metabolism?
Drugs.
Yeah. And so yeah, like the drug industry worked in parallel. There was government regulations, there was lobbying, all these kind of things. There's just this huge cultural shift. And on top of it, there were a lot more research now being put into the food industry, into nutrition science. And nutrition science is a really, really new field, actually. And it's kind of funny because the field is maybe a little bit of a pessimistic view, but we probably didn't really need clinical dietitians up until the last 100 years. Like we probably didn't need a clinical dietitian outside of there were some very rare genetic disorders and diseases and things like that, which maybe a dietitian could have been helpful for that. But for the most part, we really didn't need a dietitian back then because most people were healthy. We're healthy, yes. And it's a modern advent. I would say that food specialists could be beneficial in the non-clinical sphere as well, like for performance reasons, which has been going on for a long time. But for clinical dietetics, we probably didn't need them until only 100 years ago. And that's kind of depressing, actually. And anyway, so on the back end of all these health consequences came all these fad diets and new research into different things. And then there was money involved, and it's a huge pie now. So now you have lobbying interests, you have government contracts, you got grants being offered to different researchers who are pushing different agendas. You got social media, which is now pushing different product diets and so on. And so oh my God, wait, I just had a crazy thought. Okay.
because basically we went down the spiral of like how it's all connected with like companies and processing and how it's got commercialized. And what I'm thinking about is like essentially the way that you're talking about food or the way that you're describing food, and we talked about it last time, we're talking about almost a drug because there is effects in your body. It does change your body. It does change, you know, chemistry to a certain extent. And the way that it gets regulated and talked about is just fascinating to me because it's a drug that everyone takes to live.
Yeah.
And it will, in fact, you're hardwired to find certain ones. And so how are you, one, managing the mental piece of the eating, but also the biological drive to eat certain things? This conversation is just blowing my mind because seeing up how it's all connected. And then I'm like, it's connected on the micro level of like you yourself, individualized diet and how you respond to things in your body. And then the bigger governmental, oh, we deem these things as healthy or not, and we're gonna write these policies or beliefs or values or perceptions of these foods to make these things more enticing or not to you. And then we'll teach them to kids, and that's all you know, food pyramid. And then as you get older, you have to figure that shit out by yourself, and then ta-da.
Yeah, and I'll say, so none of the governments agree on what a good diet is, by the way.
All the school lunches across the world look different, man.
Yeah,
ours look shitty.
And some of that is well-founded. I'm definitely aware of, and it's factually accurate that different cultures sometimes have different food needs. The overall body composition and genetic differences between different subgroups of humans require slightly different things. And that's fine. I get that. But they disagree on some things that should not be disagreeable. And even if you just look in America, like we've had multiple iterations of food pyramid and so on and what is recommended. And it's quite atrocious, actually. Like I have a lot of problems with how the government guidelines are being set forth in America. Like they're really bad. Like they're straight up, like just they're bad.
They're bad.
Yeah, and so like there's some things the lobbyists get away with, which is absolutely nuts. Like they've written into legislations in your school lunches, they can code the pizza sauce as a vegetable, so that way they don't have to serve you actual vegetables. And it's just like there's like random
makes sense to me, man.
Weird stuff like that where it's like, okay, the pizza sauce, you know, it's like ketchup and sugar, and then maybe there's like
red food coloring,
a sprinkle of a tomato in there somewhere. I don't know. But they do these weird coding things, and it's purely, I mean, it's just lobbying interests are, not to get like too like political and drama, but like a lot of times the food guidelines are created by lobbyists and not by nutrition professionals. People. Yeah, and that makes it really sad because our generation who has to go through the school systems and so on, like really the entire generation of the people who live here have to have all these systems built around these poor guidelines, which is bad for health and bad for
So what you're saying is that the guns aren't killing people, it's the tomato sauce.
Tomato sauce is killing you. Yeah. And man, that pizza, that school pizza was
it's
awful.
dangerous,
anyway.
bro.
Yeah.
It's been watching too much CS:GO for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so what I'll say is kind of going back a little bit to the why nutrition matters. You know, I mentioned some big reasons there, but real quick sidebar. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about some of the crazy history of the industrialization of food, there was this really famous piece done by, I believe is Upton Sinclair, called The Jungle. Has nothing to do with jungle. But what it is
the jungle.
Like,
the jungle. Okay, jungle.
He basically showed that the food industry, specifically like the meat industry, was doing these crazy, atrocious, like it was super unclean. It was like riddled with bugs and all sorts of like toxins and stuff, and just really put them on blast. And this is what caused a lot of change for food safety and food regulations to happen. But it also kickstarted this whole, you know, it's kind of working in concert with the timeline where we're starting to industrialize food. Anyway, this is a good look at the early stages of it, which was absolutely terrible. Probably like a documentary out there about it, I would wager. So what I would say...
if you want an uplifting book or documentary, The Jungle.
Yeah. We have come a little bit a ways since then, so I am happy that it's not that bad anymore, but it is still kind of bad. And I feel like today it's a little bit more confusing as well, just because there's so many competing interests that what people get exposed to is usually either an echo chamber or they're exposed to just different conflicting views on nutrition. And there's so much misinformation out there, and people without nutrition degrees or people without a good understanding of our actual physiology and metabolism have no real way to discern whether or not one particular diet trend is superior or inferior. They just go off of, oh, well, this influencer that I follow does this, so it must be good, right? And you're kind of outsourcing your judgment capacity. And it's unfortunate because that influencer also has no nutrition background, right? And it's really funny because you'll see some influencers who have these like really crazy diets and they actually hospitalize people or something, and they don't even follow it themselves. There's so many of these influencers who push agendas that they don't follow themselves, and then their followers end up getting hospitalized for it. There's been some major lawsuits, like check it out in the media.
And Liver King was actually on steroids? Go figure. Yeah, no way, bro. What? Huh?
Yeah,
well, you can't get huge just from eating liver.
Here's one other demystifying thing. I'll let you guys peek behind the curtain a little bit. A lot of the supplements, the weight loss supplements or programs, what they do is they actually... it's so much easier to reverse the before and after. So that's what they do. So they get someone who is really, really in shape already.
And then get them fat?
And then they get them fat. And then they show you the reversal of the photos. Like, oh, look, see, he got here following my program. And he didn't. They actually force him to get fat. And then they just tell you it was the other way around.
Wow. That's so smart. I'm a fucking idiot. I believed. Wow.
Yeah, so it's super shady. It's all driven by money these days.
Now.
And yeah, I know. Just get huge.
Yeah.
But what I will say is so for anybody who's looking to improve their nutrition in general, right? Because of the ecosystem that we live in these days, it's really challenging. It really is challenging. Mm-hmm. But I would say whoever's listening, you spent hours, days, weeks, months, years on your own particular craft, right? To get better at it. And you're better now at that craft than you were when you started. And with nutrition, it's kind of the same thing. Like you need to treat it a little bit like that. If you've been growing up in modern America with no real knowledge and you kind of been flip-flopping around diets and just been, jumping on bandwagons and you really don't know where to start. Think about it like a skill. It's something that needs to be practiced and developed over time. You're not going to be great at it when you start. That's okay. It's okay. You can't really shortchange the process. But if you really focus on the fundamentals, honestly, you're going to get 90% of the benefits of nutrition. Have you seen a piece of broccoli in the last year? And a lot of times people, when they come to me, they're missing so much of the fundamentals, but they want the high level. And the high level is only going to get you that last little percent. You can't implement like fancy supplements or timing protocols or any like this like crazy like high level nutrition strategies unless the fundamentals are already covered. So it might not be sexy like to start, but you're gonna have such a bigger ROI. Are you eating mostly whole foods? Have you eaten some vegetables? Are you drinking enough fluid? Like you truly do need to crawl before you walk in this realm. Like if I asked everybody, what do they consider to be health promoting foods? What do they consider to be foods that are impeding their goals? Most people can properly identify. They're like, yeah, me binging on the weekends and going to Mickey D's 5 times a day is probably not the move. Like they know that, right? Yeah, and so most people know that, but until they actually implement the fundamentals on a consistent basis, it doesn't have to be 100%, but like 70, 80% of the time, if you're doing what you need to be doing, then what we can do is we can actually start looking at some of the more fancy stuff, but really practice it is what I'm trying to get at. Like practice it, try to get that percentage up from, like 40% of the time to 60% of the time. Practice it over time. It's okay if it's not there, but you will see major returns on, I outlined a couple of them, but some other really big ones is a lot of times people who go from a trash diet to not, they just start feeling better. Like their mood, their well-being, their energy levels all increase rather drastically. If you're someone who is not eating like any micronutrient dense foods at all, and you suddenly incorporate those, within a few weeks, your energy levels are going to be like doubled. It's actually kind of nuts. So practice it, try to work it in, and you'll get there. It's okay. But stop listening to the BS, please, and stop flip-flopping on your crazies, doing like one diet, then the next, and the next, and the next. I'll shut up for a second.
I wish I could, maybe I'll just cut that for me and just play it for everybody when I start work with them, because I think that everything you just said with your habits in eating and building it as a skill and it's a practice and the fundamentals and people wanting performance without even having a strong foundation, that is a lot of my work also, where people ask me like, oh, how can I do these crazy things, or how can I like increase my performance? And then I ask him, when's the last time you took a walk, or what's the last time you got good sleep, or drank water, or all the other things that you need to be doing to make sure you can perform. And then they say like, I don't need to do those things because I'm doing just fine without them. I just want to do this one thing. And it's like, okay, the things that you're doing make doing that thing so much harder. And if you just did these other small things, that thing that you are trying to do that so hard would just come naturally because you have the cognitive faculties to actually think, plan, and do, or at least manage the mental, emotional part or the impulses to help you see that thing more clearly or actually unlock that piece for you. But if you keep doing the things you're doing, it's going to be a lot harder to get there. Again, you want to get to McDonald's. The way you're picking is an incline of 7,000 feet and around the United States to get here. And if we just went this way, it'd be all downhill in 3 miles. But that's just to the left and across the bushes that you don't want to go through because the bushes are scratchy.
Yeah. I absolutely hate when I hear this, and I always have to fight it very, very tooth and nail. But I hate when I hear it. But a lot of times people will be like, well, my diet's been trash until now, and look at me, I'm a stud. Right, like I'm already amazing. Or look at that guy. That guy has been eating.
They do that too. Yeah.
He's been eating hamburgers and hot dogs his whole life, and look at him. He's fine. Yeah, he's the starter, right? Yeah, and that argument is so stupid. It just logically, it's completely illogical. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. Just because this worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. First off, just because you have done something in the past does not mean that the results would have been different if you took a different route. Yeah. And so a lot of times these individuals are succeeding despite their diet, not because of it. Yeah. Not because of it, right? You probably could have been better than where you were now if you had taken it seriously across those time. But because you're not in that present moment, you don't really notice it. You don't have a before and after because you're just locked into the perception of, well, I did this despite my diet. Imagine for a second how good you could have been if you took your sleep, your mental, your physical, your nutrition all seriously up until now, right? You could have had 2 decades of that underneath your belt and you would have been like to the moon already, you know what I mean? But they don't like to account for that.
I think even expanding what I talked about on Tuesday about the grind, if you wanted to incorporate this part of the grind too, because I think when people think about the grind, they just think about the playing, they just think about the training, the doing of the mechanics, but they don't extend that further to the learning. Or to these other pieces outside of the game that contribute to the performance inside of the game that is the grind. Because I think when people think about the grind, they think, oh, it's so hard to do all these things in game versus shifting to the other hard things that might take time outside of the game too. So maybe we can even expand it to incorporate this part of the grind that actually helps too. Not just in-game stuff, also the out-of-game stuff that might be just as irritating or frustrating to do. Because I think people only think about taking an L or that defeat thing comes on the screen, but when that happens in real life, we're like, oh, we're not gonna queue up again, I don't want to do that. But in a game, you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna one more time, boop, and we do it again. It's so weird, the disconnect between the things that we're doing in and outside the game, you know?
Yeah, and I actually, that's something that I also really try to get away from, going back to some of the brass tack stuff, is I've had some athletes in the past where I'm like, oh, I need you to drink more water, right? And then the first day that they drink a lot of water, then they have a bad scrim day and they're like, I'm never drinking more water again.
I peed so much, I missed a lot of scrims. I couldn't even focus and concentrate, Casey.
Yeah, it was 100% your fault because you made me drink more water. And then they just they say, screw it. And I really hate when those kind of things happen because you're linking two events together that really aren't super linked together, and it's just because it happened that way. And so what I try to do is I try to find some metrics that they might be indirectly related to performance, but it's not going to be tied strictly to like a win and a loss. I find that wins and losses have so many other variables included that,
especially in a team game, bro.
Yeah, it's not like there's literally 1,000,001 things that could go wrong, and like you could have rolled over a rock in your chair and then it bumped your hand and then you missed a shot or something. Like there's literally like any number of Final Destination kind of, things could have happened and could have forced you to lose outside of just this one particular variable. And so a lot of times people will give up on something if they have a bad day and they get stressed out with it. And I find that what I need to do on the front end is if they pick any metrics that are, oh, I want to win more, that's how I'll know if I succeed. I have to be like, let's revise this because that can't be the metric of success is wins and losses. Yeah, we need to find something else. So like, did your reaction time improve? Did you have less injured time? Did you feel better on like a 1 to 10 Likert scale? All these kind of things.
Did you play for longer? Did you hurt less?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that's really important. And I feel that a lot of esports athletes pretty much only look at the wins and the losses, and not even did they get better, right? I mean, if you got a lot better in a scrim, but you took a hard L, like I consider that a huge win. That's a
huge dub, yeah, absolutely.
But like a lot of times, it's like a lot of people get wrapped up into that, and we need to disassociate sometimes those things because they get really one-dimensional with it.
Absolutely. That's something I highlight too, because I always tell my players that it's really hard to use wins and losses as your metric of success. Yes, this is a performance-based industry. At the same time, what we're looking for is not just one time. We're trying to build dynasties. We're trying to build legacies. We're trying to do consistency. So if you took this one L here, that's fine. But when we continuously take L's, okay, now we have to talk about it. But if you took an L and you learned something that was important for you to win the next game, that's a dub. And so I think even conceptualizing like how we define success, at the same time, what does a loss mean to you? It depends really how you lose, when you lose, where you lose. But people just think, oh, taking L bad versus how can we take this L so we can only take this one L and not more L's in the future.
Yeah, and I think really at the end of the day that's the appropriate way to look at it, and that requires some deconditioning as well too, which is really tough.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the benefits of nutrition. I think I talked on quite a few. It's like a mini recap. You can avoid your fears, you can get your wants, you can be more physically attractive, you can make more money, you can be smarter, faster, stronger, you can feel better, reduce your risk of injury and illness. It's also a sign of maturity too. Actually, I've seen some scouting reports nowadays where they take into consideration if they have to baby you. Can you do your laundry? Are you exercising? Are you not eating like an idiot? Are you mature? And so like I've seen that where sometimes they do these like cultural assessments based off of for team fits rather than purely performance driven. Are you number one on the ladder?
Yeah.
So like you can also impress like prospective scouts with your, nutrition skills as well. Potentially. Nutrition does a lot. Take it seriously, and it's only going to seriously help you.
Yeah, from this conversation, I never really thought of the different ways the cross. I mean, I knew that they crossed, but after having this conversation, the depth in which they cross are two fields. This is really, really interesting. For me, I think the takeaways, the things I wrote down was people don't change unless something is more painful.
Oh, yeah.
So unless something is more painful than where you are, that dictates where you're going to go. So make it worse. I don't know if that's, I thought that was really interesting. Like, okay, if eating a broccoli is more painful than taking an L, then I'm not gonna eat the broccoli. And then it's really interesting, the perception of pain and what you decide is painful.
Yeah.
And then at what point do you want to say, I've had enough of this? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
The thing I want to highlight, you said, is success breeds more success, and finding the small little wins. Linking this to what you just said, making sure you attribute your small wins to what you're putting into your mouth, so you can anchor that to the belief and the value, which makes it last longer. Because I think the thing that you're saying is when people are able to change the behavior, okay, I'm going to drink more water, okay, I'm going to eat more vegetables, that may last for a month or so. But if the belief isn't there, it tends to not last longer. If you've noticed that, okay, you've decided that you want to change the behavior, but you haven't gotten that decision deep enough to make it a lasting habit or behavioral change. You're able to change behavior, but not the belief behind that behavior. So more importantly than doing the thing differently, you have to think differently so the thing stays longer.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has to. If there's a discrepancy between those two, it just doesn't stick. Mm-hmm. It does not stick. You need both pieces, and nutrition is hugely mental. And so help me write some of my intake and assessment forms, man.
Oh yeah, don't worry, you can help me too. And then the last one for me, this is my own personal takeaway. Instead of me prescribing someone's homework or takeaways for the session, my goal is now to ask from the session, what are you going to do? What are your goals? What do you want to do? And then making sure to modify if it's too big. I like how you scale it. If this is less than an 8 of your confidence level, we make it smaller. So I think it's really important too, when you even think about these conversations. We're talking about a lot of stuff. We've been talking for like an hour 30, my Streamlabs have said. But really, I think the thing that you can do is if you even take one small thing away, that one thing that you're interested in, like, oh, I never thought about this. Chew on it, put it in your mouth, and see how that's going to change your mind or the things that you actually do with your body. And it doesn't have to be these huge, I'm now about to listen to Ryan in case you have to make this huge plan. It could literally be, oh, I want to think about my beliefs about food or my relationship with food and how I'm thinking about even punishing myself after I eat a big meal. Am I doing this? Be more conscious of your relationship and how that affects what you do and your nutrition.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it all really nicely, honestly. And I think if anybody listening just starts to think about their own nutrition practices and what they believe about food a little bit more, I think that's going to go a long way to having these trickle down effects for literally the rest of their life, honestly. And one other small potential shout out for, I guess, myself, but
yes, please do.
That I'll just say is, please don't listen to just the big guy in the gym or your favorite influencer regarding nutrition science issues. Yeah, maybe. But actually, if you have a real nutrition question, please seek out an actual nutrition professional, because I feel like so many people are getting their nutrition information from wrong sources, and it just feeds this inconsistency, this misinformation, these myths that are out there. And it's also leading to the belief that nutrition scientists really have no idea and there's no consensus on certain topics. It's like, well, the scientists can't agree, so then how are we supposed to? I'm just going to listen to the influencer. And that's not true. If you ask most nutrition scientists or nutrition professionals, we actually have a pretty good consensus on almost all of these topics. It's only minor stuff that is still hotly debated, and it's only very polarizing in social media. It's not in the science that way. So please, whether it's me or someone else, just seek out a nutrition professional if you have any questions about this kind of stuff.
Probably people are talking about and promoting diets and things that have worked for them. Yeah. And by talking to a nutritional professional, they'll help you find what works for you.
Yes. Yeah. It's well known. I mean, so I could put 100 people on the exact same diet, and I'll be lucky if maybe a third respond exactly how I expect them to. You can expect it's roughly a third, where a third will respond as you expect. A third is going to have no response, and a third might actually get the opposite response to what you expect. It's only through getting to know you as an individual that we can predict which bucket you would actually fall into for different types of protocols. So that's where it really helps when you become individualized, because what worked for your friend, what worked for your family member, very likely will not work for you. Okay, very likely will not work for you. And so it's really about figuring out what does work for you personally. And that part is its own journey. Have some fun with it. So
have some fun.
Yeah. No, food should be fun. I really believe that. Like, food should be fun, and it should bring people together. It shouldn't be this big monster that people have worked up in their head. It's like this burden that you have to account for. No, food should be fun, I think.
So you would be an advocate of playing with your food?
All the time, man. All the time, man. I got some whipped cream. You want to come over here?
Yes, I do. I'll be right. And on that note, all right. So if you guys like this episode, I dropped our first, I believe, Coffee with Casey on our YouTube channel, or on my YouTube channel. You can find that through my website, psychsensei.com. And if maybe not talking about your food beliefs, but if you want to talk about your beliefs in general about yourself, you as a gamer, pursuing your game as a craft and getting better at it. And also I'm extending it to, streamers or even casters. If you guys want some life coaching or talking about your unique issues or challenges in your field of gaming, let me know. You can find that consultation form on my website, psychsensei.com, and also find all the resources that I drop on Fridays, Mondays, Tuesdays, all of it there on my website. And Casey, your turn. Tag.
Yeah, I'll just say Ryan's a legend, so go seek him out for sure. If you do have any like random nutrition questions, you can hit me up on Twitter, though. I try to answer those as best as I can. So that's at Casey Thomas RD. And if you want to find me personally, get a little bit more in touch, you can go to gamerdiet.gg. That's my website. There's some good content on there. I'm working on it. It could be better. It's going to happen. Give me some time. But there's also a contact form on there. So that's the best way. If you want to get in touch with me, you can shoot me a message there and we can chat. And if you just want to say hello, I love that too. It makes me feel good. So, just say hi. I'd appreciate that.
Honestly, Casey's, your Twitter's, I think, underappreciated, man. You put a lot of interesting threads and stuff there. So I highly encourage you follow Casey. And if you want crazy thoughts, you can follow me too.
Have fun with your food. Treat it like a skill in the short term if you have had some problems in the past, but have fun with it, enjoy it, start small, and you'll get there.
Yeah, we need to think of your tagline, man. Food is fun, something. We'll figure it out.
Food is fun.
Food is fun. All right, friends. Well, thanks for having coffee with Casey and I. We'll be back next week, Friday, covering another fun topic. But we'll be back next Friday at 9 a.m. to have another discussion with psychology, nutrition, and coffee. And if you guys want those resources, find my website or Casey's website. Get those on our YouTube channels. All right, friends. Well, happy Friday. Take it easy. You guys stay safe. Pieces. And always remember, star mental wins. Casey, insert tagline.
Insert tagline. I got nothing. I don't have a tagline. Eat good stuff.
Eat good stuff.
Make good choices.
Make good choices. Eat good stuff. I like it. Look at broccoli.
Yeah. Look at broccoli. It'll help. I'll come up with something better for you guys. Don't worry.
We'll figure it out. All right, friends. Take it easy. Love ya. Bye. Mwah, mwah, mwah.